All right, we are live. In today's stream, we are going to continue NFL free agency thoughts. Within the past, I'd say, hour and a half, Cooper Kupp became a Seahawk, so we're going to discuss Cooper Kupp becoming a Seahawk. We are going to discuss really continued free agency, because a couple of days ago, whenever I was live for the initial free agency period, Sam Darnold hadn't signed. There were a lot of other players that hadn't signed either, so I do have an entire free agency board up, if you will. Aaron Banks had not yet signed with the Packers. That was a big deal. Josh Sweat had not signed with the Cardinals, which, by the way, I really did like that deal for the Arizona Cardinals. And there's a whole lot more. We didn't discuss the Colts at length. Cam Bynum, Charvarius Ward, they improved their secondary, which was really big for Indy to simply bring in better talent than what they had in 2024. And it was also good to see them acquire players with a bit of an urgency relative to how Chris Ballard's job is at this point in time. So, all right, let's go ahead. Any questions, guys? This is your guys' stream, so fire away. All right, who do you think the Broncos take first round? Well, they signed Evan Ingram, so that was another thing that didn't happen until much later in free agency. Not that we're 6 months into free agency by any means, but a couple days after the first initial wave, if you will. So I think Evan Ingram buys them at least a year where they don't have to take Colston Loveland, because I would assume that Tyler Warren will probably not be there when they're in the clock in the first round. So whenever you think about the Broncos in the first round, I think Matthew Golden makes a lot of sense. I think Emeka Egbuka makes a lot of sense. Basically, any receiver rather that is, I don't think Tedero McMillan will be there. So take your guess between Egbuka and Golden. I think both of those players would make a lot of sense. So I'm a big Egbuka fan. I also like Luther Burden a lot. I think he'll get back to the player that he was in 2023. So that would be pretty good. All right, Kupp's contract couldn't be better for both parties. Good. I'm happy for him. I'm happy for Cooper. I'm happy for the Seahawks. Rams fans are definitely not happy, I'm sure, given that everything that the Coopers gave to their franchise over the past 8 years. But it's a business, and it happens. All right, H. Brazzi, appreciate the super chat. In 2018, if we stuck at pick 16 and took DJ Moore, still made the trade with the Eagles to get Lamar at 32, we could have won a chip by now. Here's the thing: you can't do this with drafts because it'll drive you crazy. Because if And here's why. I'll just refer to the same draft for reference. My Vikings signed Kirk Cousins to a 3-year, $84 million deal, fully guaranteed, $28 million average annual value 7 years ago. The first round they took corner Mike Hughes from Central Florida, who was a bust for them. He's been a journeyman around the league. He had a good NFL debut, had a pick 6, unfortunately suffered a season-ending injury, and he in 2018. And his NFL debut was the highlight of his time in Minnesota. But if they say at pick 30 and draft Lamar, Justin Jefferson, who knows, right? So you can't beat yourself up with that. But it's, I get where you're coming from, though. I do get where you're coming from. But you can do those for, I promise you can do those for every team. How do you think Buffalo feels knowing they gave the Chiefs Patrick Mahomes? Because in 2017, they had pick 10. They traded back to pick 27. They got another first-round pick in 2018, which was the Chiefs' first-round pick. The Chiefs go up to pick 10 to get Patrick Mahomes. The rest, I guess you could say, is history. Now, I know the Bills got Josh Allen, of course, but the 0-4 in the playoffs is not ideal to look at. All right, let's see here. Dalman was decent at best. I thought that was a good pickup for the Bears. There was one question in particular that I wanted to... T-Lightning, appreciate it. All right. The Eagles took Jordan Davis and his colossal backside one pick before Kyle Hamilton. He is a big fella. He is indeed a big fella. All right. How did the Rams handle free agency? I want to pull up... So I'm actually going to... I want to pull up... let me see if I can pull this up with Spot Track, and then that way I can just have everything like on the same screen. We're going to try that. Again, your boy is not the best technological wise, so we're going to try this. We're going to see if this works. Let me go ahead and pull up. That way I can just convert with each team here. That way we can just have the conversations here with each team. So right now we are going to see if I can pull up this deal window capture and then just go with boom. Boom, here I am, should be right there, and there we are. Okay, so let me make this bigger on the screen, and then we'll be good. All right, All right, so the Rams right now, the Rams signed, no, something went wrong. The Rams signed, obviously, Davante Adams. I did like that signing a lot, and they also signed Poona Ford. So I like both of those signings for the Rams. Let's see here. I don't think I can go back to the studio, which is a problem, or like the comments. So let me pull up the comments on my personal laptop. I have that on a separate screen. But so the Rams, I mean, look, Davante Adams, to get him for $22 a year, Cooper Kupp was obviously going to demand a lot. I thought the Rams did fine. Poona Ford is a solid player. I do like Poona Ford for what he is. Now, obviously, I don't think he's going to, let me think how to word this. I don't think statistically he's going to put up, asinine numbers, if you will. But I like what the Rams did, and you have to remember that they're going to kind of have limited cap with the allocations that they have to, the big name players in the roster like Matt Stafford and previously Cooper Kupp. But I thought the Rams did okay, all things considered. So I'm trying to pull up the live chat. Unfortunately, it's not pulling up. So just give me a sec. I promise I will work through this. So let me just get through this here, and then there we go. All right, there's that. And there we are. All right, we are back. All right, how will any of this affect your stock portfolio? Good question, Nicholas. Let's go ahead and go right here. And there we are. All right, we are back, guys. All right, fair point. Ironically, if you were to pick which team has the worst history when you do the draft revisionist, the Vikings take the cake. Honestly, no, we don't. The Raiders are a lot worse. The Raiders took Jamarcus Russell instead of Calvin Johnson. Joe Thomas was taken right after. They took, who was it? They took somebody directly in front of Aaron Rodgers. It was like a corner that didn't work out. The Raiders are a lot worse, I promise. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Now we have this pulled up, so we're good. We're good in terms of, let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. Does this work on here? There we go. All right, I want to get this ad off the screen, but we're fine. We're cooking. We're cooking. That's all that matters. We're back, baby. All right. Is there another team besides the Cowboys that did too much and a team? Wait. Is there, besides the Cowboys, that did too much in a team, the Saints had confusing moves? So let's just pull up the Cowboys here. I wasn't a fan of what the Cowboys did, man. I really wasn't. Dante Fowler's fine, by the way. Sorry, let me back that up. I like the Dante Fowler. But the one that I was referring to, this is the one that I was referring to, sorry. Miles Sanders, I was just kind of like, why? Solomon Thomas, okay, it's a depth player. Hopefully you get something there. But Javonte Williams, I thought, was good for what you paid for him. Peyton Turner he played 15 games in the first 3 years of his career. He played 16 games last year. Hopefully it works out. The Cowboys are just in a really tough situation. Now for the Saints, I do want to pull up what the Saints did here, because this is another franchise where people think that, when I criticize their teams, they think that I am like a hater of their team, and I'm surprised more Titans fans haven't commented this, just because I've been so critical of their moves this free agency, because they frustrate me so much. But the Saints are another team, man. Hey, let's give $10 million average annual value to Jawan Johnson. Let's give another 10.5 to Justin Reed. Chase Young, I'm fine with that contract because he's a good player. But I thought the Saints were going to try and to, really set their cap back another year, or not set their cap back, but I thought they were going to try and actually reset things, and that they were going to, this was going to be the year with Kellen where it was going to be like, all right, hey, we're going to have this reset year, 2026 will be fine, but they don't seem to care. I mean, and I know a lot of Saints fans, by the way, have, in the videos that I've posted, that they want Mickey Loomis gone. I get it. But the Saints, I just don't understand, man. I really don't. Jacob Savage, appreciate it. Do you think Garrett Bradbury would be a good pickup for the Falcons now that they've lost Drew Dahlman? I'm going to be honest. I mean, Garrett Bradbury's not good. I would say, the Derek Carrs of centers. You can do a lot worse than Garrett Bradbury, but you're going to be limited. Please understand that you are going to be limited. He's not a good player. We have not one, not half a year, not two, but literally 6 years of evidence of him not being a good player. So don't expect too much. I think he would be a downgrade from Dahlman, at least from what we saw in 2024. Garrett Bradbury really, really struggles with big players. I'm not just referring to like Dexter Lawrence. Obviously, he is a very big player, and he does struggle with him, obviously. But everyone struggles with Dexter Lawrence. But I'm more so referring to guys, like Jordan Davis, just big defensive tackles. He struggles. He's not very good. And what frustrates me here is Garrett Bradbury, when he came out in the draft process, was a really good athlete. Like he was. I'm not going to pull it up, but I know he benched like 30 or 31 reps, and that doesn't always translate to play strength, because at times he is not. He's just. I mean, if you watch him and if he plays for your team next year, you will immediately know what I'm referring to. He's not a great player. He continuously gets bullied in pass pro. Very frustrating player because the tools are there. All right. Here. This is what I mean right here. I hated on the Steelers last year. And I would ask this question: is hating on a team? Is it hating on a team, or is it being realistic? Because at what point were we supposed to buy in with the Steelers and say, you know what, Russ, Najee, George Pickens, and Freiermuth, they're leading us to a Super Bowl. We're going into Buffalo divisional round. We're gonna pull it out. That's the group that's gonna lead us. So is it hating, or is it being realistic? And that's kind of where I stand with the Steelers. Is where, you know, is it hating, or is it being realistic? That's the one for me where it's with Pittsburgh that they frustrate me, because they could be a better team than what they are, albeit they are in a very tough situation. All right. My first round pick for the Steelers at this point, that's a good question, man. That is a good question. Speaking of the Steelers, for a while, I was just steadily mocking either Ibuka or Burden, whichever one fell. I was steadily mocking that position to the Steelers. But right now, with the way the Steelers are, because they just traded the second round pick for DK, they only have 2 top 100 picks. Now, it is also worth noting for the Pittsburgh Steelers, let's go to the Steelers here in free agency, by the way. It is worth noting here for the Steelers that quarterback could very easily be a need in the draft. We don't know how the Aaron Rodgers situation is going to play out. Nobody knows that at this point. They lost Najee Harris to the Chargers, and I don't think the Steelers are going to go running back. I would be very surprised if they did. But I'll say this, man. I obviously like Ashton Jeanty a lot. Everyone does. He's a great player. Obviously, everyone knows that. Marion Hampton is a very good player too. If the Steelers went either Jeanty or O'Marion, depending on how the board plays out, you could convince me of that. But I mean, it also depends on how the tackle situation plays out in the draft. And the Steelers don't have. I mean, they don't have necessarily. Here's their picks: 21, 83, 123, 156, and then they have a 6 and a 7. So they don't have a lot of capital to maneuver around, but they're certainly not in the worst situation either. But you know, they could trade picks next year, but we'll see how the tackle run plays out. But I think right now, first round, it would probably be, if Jeanty falls, I don't think he will. I don't think he's going to get past Chicago at 10. But Jeanty, Hampton, or offensive tackle. I don't know if that's a hot take, but that's kind of where I stand on that. All right, H. Brazzi, appreciate the super chat, man. Really do. I said this is Marcus' chat the other day. I talked to Marcus a couple times today. Let's see here. And I want your take on it. Lamar, Josh, and Joe are better than most quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame already. Pat is already the GOAT to me. I don't care about Tom's gifted rings. All right. Let's see. I mean, there's obviously going to be, this is a different conversation than I thought would be had. Just being honest. I'll pull up the Ravens here while we're talking about Lamar. But what has to be noted with Lamar, what has to be noted with any of the guys in today's era, is there's going to be a significant era difference. I mean, you can't sit here and compare Otto Graham and Sid Luckman and Joe Namath and Terry Bradshaw to Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Even here's one that's I mean, even like Kyler Murray, just from an athleticism standpoint, right? And if you look up Terry Bradshaw's all-time stats, he has 212 touchdowns and 210 interceptions. I remember when I was like 12 years old, and I just remember looking at stats for the first time, and I just remember being baffled that guys like Ken Stabler, rest in peace, and Joe Namath each had more interceptions than touchdowns. But I don't disagree with what you're saying, by the way. Like, I don't disagree with the fact that Lamar, Josh, and Joe are better than most quarterbacks in the Hall of Fame. But like I said, it's hard to compare Terry Bradshaw to Joe Burrow, right? So it's just from an era standpoint, I would argue 90% of quarterbacks in today's era are going to be better than those guys like pre-1980. Now, John Elway, Joe Montana, Dan Marino, those guys are, especially Elway, especially a young Elway, those guys are in a different discussion. But I get what you're saying. All right. Should the Steelers trade down in the draft? I wouldn't be opposed to that. The thing is, the Steelers are going to be in a situation where, you can look at a team like the Texans, who are certainly going to need offensive line help, especially after the past couple of days. Let's pull the Texans up while we're talking about it. The Texans have frustrated me, to be honest. They trade away Laramie Tunsil, which was a culture thing, apparently. They trade for Ed Ingram. By the way, if there's any Texans fans watching this that are wondering about Ed Ingram, from a Vikings fan, he's not good. He's kind of like the NFC version of Kenyon Green. I would not expect a lot from Ed Ingram, just if you were wondering. But the Texans are going to be a prime trade-up team. That's the only way that I see this right now with the Houston Texans, is they are going to be a team where, hey, we need help for our young quarterback. We don't want him to get killed the way he just did. So the Texans are a prime trade-up team, whether that's with Pittsburgh, whether that's with really any of the other teams in front of them. The Texans are going to be a team that needs to trade up. All right. Appreciate it. If you were Washington, would you trade your first for Henderson? Definitely indicative of how they would view this year's draft if AP makes the move. Okay, I am going to be honest here. If I'm Washington, would I trade my first for Henderson? Why am I blanking? Who is? I hate when I go live and my mind just completely shuts off. Who is Henderson and why am I blanking? What am I missing here? It's somebody obvious. It's somebody very obvious, and I'm just not comprehending, and I feel like a dummy. Trey Hendrickson. Okay, that makes sense. Trey Hendrickson. That makes more sense, because I was like, why? The only Henderson I can think of are like Devery Henderson, if you guys remember him, and EJ Henderson, the Aaron Henderson, the Henderson brothers, but Hendrickson. So we'll talk about that. So Trey Hendrickson. That's on me more than anything. But with Trey Hendrickson, would I trade a first for him? I personally would not if I was the Commanders. Trey Hendrickson is a really good player. He's had back-to-back 17.5 sacks for a reason. Let's pull up Washington's moves, by the way, while we're discussing the Commanders. But when you look at where Washington is, I want to pull up their draft capital as well. And by the way, they're not going to have a lot of draft capital, just because they have made a couple of trades, and good for them, by the way. I'm not going to scold a team like Washington making those trades. I will scold a team like Houston trading away a good tackle like Laramie Tunsil despite him committing false starts. I will scold the Texans. But right now, the Commanders have 5 picks, and I would argue 2 of those picks, I don't want to say don't matter, but they're dart throws, and especially one. They have picks 29 and 61, and then 128 from Houston. Then they have 205, and then 245. 245, that selection in the 7th round, you're simply hoping that guy makes the roster. You are not expecting that player to do really anything. It's a late 7th round pick for a reason. So I would argue the Commanders really have 3.5 picks. So I would not want the Commanders to trade a first round pick for Trey Hendrickson at this point. Trey Hendrickson is 30. He'll be 31 in December. I get that he just had a 17.5 sack year, led the league in pressures. But this may be a hot take, but I think the Commanders are a little further away from the Super Bowl than Trey Hendrickson. I think the best bet for them would be to just build through the draft over the next couple of years. And by the way, I'm going to be honest, I did not like this signing right here at all. I thought that Javon Kinlaw I thought that was a really bad deal for them. All right, let's go to the chat here. All right, what else do we have? Hey, love your content. What are your thoughts on the Ravens? Do you think the trade for Starks, because we need a free safety in Washington, moves to corner? I would be pretty surprised if the Ravens trade up for Malachi Starks. The Ravens they definitely need safety help, but I think the safety class is pretty good. I don't think the safety class is being discussed as much nationally as it probably should be. But I really, really like the safety class, whether it is Nick Emanwari, whether it's Malachi Starks, whether it's Andrew Makuba. Kevin Winston would be a really good Baltimore Raven, just a really good player that falls into their laps. Xavier Watts is another good player. Billy Bowman is another good player. I'm a big fan of the safety class. All right, Brazzy, appreciate the super chat. Here's $5 to take a minute to talk about the Cardinals. My boy Carson in the chat has asked several times, stop ignoring him. There's a lot of comments, so I'm not ignoring Carson specifically, to be clear. But which I appreciate everyone being in here. But the Cardinals, let's go ahead and pull up what they've done. First off, love the Josh Sweat signing. And one of the reasons that I loved the Josh Sweat signing was the lack of pass rush from the Cardinals last year. Now, what has to be acknowledged with the Cardinals from last year is they had a player go down prior to the season even starting in BJ Ojulari, who I'm a big fan of. If anybody has followed the channel for more than a year or so, then you know that I'm a big BJ Ojulari guy. But the Cardinals could not get after the quarterback at all last year. And I mean at all. And for reference, to give you an idea of how much they could not get after the quarterback, their leading pass rusher in pressures last year, I want to get the exact numbers because I was looking at it the other day and it was awful. So I'm waiting for this to load on another screen. But by the way, I do want to talk about the Dalvin Tomlinson signing. Thought that was a really good pickup for them. And I really do like what the Cardinals are building in addition to the Josh Sweat. Now, the Cardinals, to go back to the pressures here, Zaven Collins, who was a converted middle linebacker from the previous regime, led the team in pressures with 31. LJ Collier, former first-round pick, as you can see, didn't exactly work out if he's signing for 1 year, $3 million. LJ Collier, I wish him the best, but he's not a great player. So he finished second on the team with 29 pressures. Now, for reference, Zaven Collins leads the team 31 pressures on 289 pass rushing snaps. Obviously, this player was having a defensive player of the year caliber season to start, but I want to say it was 5.5 games, 4.5 games, whichever it was, Aiden Hutchinson had 45 pressures on 198 pass rushing snaps. So Aiden Hutchinson got injured in the middle of October and still would have led the Cardinals in pressures by 14 last year. So for the Cardinals to go get Josh Sweat, love it. To go get Dalvin Tomlinson, love it. Especially in that division, because you need to be able to stop the run. You need to be able to get after the quarterback. And the Cardinals are going down a route similar to what the Eagles have done over the past couple of years. And I think there's a reason for that. And it's due in large part to having Jonathan Gannon as the coach and just watching that team first up close and personal is what I meant to say, in 2022 when they had everybody get after the quarterback the way they did. So I like what the Cardinals are building. I really do. All right, how are my Raiders looking? I know nothing big, but what do I think? So the biggest thing for the Raiders is they are simply raising the floor. Appreciate the super chat, Rich, by the way, as always. They are simply raising the floor. And that's a big thing is the Raiders, obviously everybody knows were not a good team last year. I mean, everybody knows that. You head into the season with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell as your starting quarterbacks. You're limiting your ceiling before you even take the field to maybe 9 wins. Maybe you have a couple of crazy wins that you pull out. Maybe you make the playoffs. But everybody knew that, right? So by trading for Geno, you raise that floor. You also buy yourself some time to be able to go get a quarterback. And for the Raiders, I really like just the fact that they did that, to be able to go out and say, hey, we know we are in, honestly, arguably the toughest division at this point because you have to deal with Mahomes, Herbert, and now Bo Nix, not just for a year or two, but presumably the next 6, 7, 8, 9 years. So they go out, they raise the floor, they bring in Raheem Mostert, which I wouldn't expect much from him, but the Raiders running backs were also not good last year. Like that was a problem. I mean, the whole offense, well, not the whole offense, but the quarterback and running backs last year and the receivers really outside of Jacoby Myers, I'm not really going to include Devontae Adams because he really didn't play much last year, were a problem for the Raiders. So to go bring in Geno, to bring in Raheem Mostert while still having the 6th overall pick, by the way, I like what they're doing. In terms of raising the floor, do I think they're going to win 12 games this year? No. But it's a floor raiser, and that's kind of what they needed. All right. Opinions on Lions free agency. Let's go ahead and go through the Lions free agency real fast. DJ Reed thought it was tremendous value. First off, love that. Roy Lopez. Not a lot of people know about Roy Lopez, but just a solid defensive player. And if you can place him next to Ali McNeil, you're placing him in a lot of favorable situations, especially with a healthy Hutch coming back. I like Roy Lopez. I like him for who he is as a player. Now to talk a little more about, I'm going to put me back on the screen more. Let me get this off. There we go. Okay. There we go. Now to To talk a little more about Roy Lopez, I just want to pull up again his exact numbers just to give you an idea. Roy Lopez was a 6th round pick back in 2021. He's played for the Cardinals over the past couple of years. He can push the pocket at times. Don't expect a 45 pressured 8 sack year from Roy Lopez, but as a second player along the defensive line, or a second interior player along the defensive line, I like the deal for what it is for Detroit. So I want to move this around here. Move this, and we're back. All right, there we go. Do I have season tickets to the Vikings? No, that would be quite the commute, brother. I live in Maryland, so that would be a very, very long commute for myself. Also, to be honest, I haven't been to a game in 4 years because the weekly recaps on Sunday nights have to get done, and if I go to a game, that's just the weekly recaps are not going to happen. So that's also a reason for that. Finally made it to a stream. Appreciate it. Appreciate you being here. And somebody said just got home from practice. That's what's up. All right. Let's see here. Chargers missing out on wide receivers in free agency. I think they will address that. Jim Harbaugh knows what his team needs. I think they'll certainly address that soon for sure. But they brought back Mike Williams. So not that that's the answer for everything, but at least they did bring back Mike Williams. So that is good for them. All right. Let's see here. Who do you think will trade for Myers? Who is Myers? What am I missing here? Would you do a video on Kwesi and his tenure as Viking so far in his 3 years as the GM? I'm debating on it. I'm debating on making a video titled, and this is going to be, oh, you're a Vikings fan, but I think I do a good job of hiding the bias in terms of being a Vikings fan, at least for the most part. Now, there's times where I get really excited about my team, but reasonably speaking, I think they're doing everything the right way. And the video would be titled, "The Minnesota Vikings are doing everything right." You know, they're building around J.J. McCarthy. They saw their team get their teeth kicked in last year in the playoffs, in the trenches, and they go out, they spend over $100 million on the offensive line by bringing in Will Fries and by bringing in Ryan Kelly. They bring in Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave. And I know both of those guys have had their problems in run defense, but they don't need either of those players to come in and be Vince Wilfork. We are fine on defense against the run. They finished top 5 in both rushing yards against and rushing yards allowed last year. So they really just need those guys to push the pocket so you can but you can have 4 solid players in Jonathan Grenard, who finished top 5 in pressures last year, Andrew Van Ginkel, the Swiss Army knife of the defense, a second-year Dallas Turner. Now Jonathan Allen is Javon Hargrave, so I would definitely consider that for sure. All right, what's up, Dominic? Resident Steelers fan here. Any talk of realism is hating on the team. There is no talk of reality here. You're no longer welcome in the 4-1-2. I will say this, by the way. For anybody living in the Western PA area, first off, Fiore's Pizza, chef's kiss. That is truly as good as it gets. Now, I'm not a Beato's guy. I'm not an Ohio Valley pizza guy or whatever that's called with the Lunchable pizza. Not Lunchable pizza, but you know what I'm referring to. Fiore's. I am Team Fiore's over Beato's Pizza. But I will say for the 412 people out there, the shirts the black shirts with the white lettering with the 4 and the 1 in the same, like the 4 and the 1. I don't know if you can see it, but the 4 and the 1 being in the same, and then the 2. Those are some cool shirts. So keep it up, 412. You guys know what I'm talking about. All right. Why didn't J.J. McCarthy stay another year in college? It's just not that simple. It's never that simple. I guess it is for some guys like Cam Ward. JJ wanted to go out on a national championship. He knew the team this year would not be as good. They weren't as good. Everybody left. That's the better answer. Is everybody left. He didn't want to stay. He was a first-round pick already. I don't blame him. I mean, not that JJ was thinking, a million or like infinity IQ rather, but it was a good year to be selected as a quarterback last year, and if he stayed another year, he could be going to Tennessee right now, and any quarterback that had the choice right now between going to Minnesota or Tennessee would choose Minnesota in a heartbeat. So, no Harbaugh either is also a great point, James. That is a great point. Talk about the Hawks. All right, let's talk about the Seahawks. Let's talk about the Seattle Seahawks. All right. So, Seattle. First off, I understand the frustration with Geno, with people not wanting to let it go, because Geno provided some very high highs at quarterback. I mean, there were plays where you'd watch on tape where there's a window that you can fit a football through a mailbox in. Geno hits it. There's plays that Geno makes, your jaw it just drops. You're just like, oh man, Geno made that throw. So I understand. I don't really care about the stats because Geno's numbers are different than how he actually played. Seahawks fans especially know this, especially with the interior offensive line last year. However, having said all of this, Geno's going to be 35 this fall. And when you think about where the Seahawks are right now as a team, you ask the simple question, hey, are we going to be able to build this team with this core up while Geno starts to physically decline over the next 2 or 3 years? Can we win a Super Bowl in that window? I personally thought the answer was no, and especially the trade for DK, or the trading away of DK Metcalf, would kind of also signify how they feel. Now, there's also a belief, or not a belief rather, but there's also a thought process of, well, they didn't want to pay a wide receiver $30 million per year, and I get it. But it's not going to be that easy to replace DK Metcalf at the snap of a finger. Now, I know they just brought in Cooper Kupp, but they also had to replace Tyler Lockett. But for where the Seahawks are, I like the direction they're going because they want more of a youth movement. I realize that's kind of ironic because they just brought in Cooper Kupp literally 2 hours ago. But Cooper's not going to be the long-term fix where they're saying, hey, what do we have in 2028? Cooper is a stopgap player right now. He's going to upgrade what you have. And I like where the Seahawks are headed because there's a reality right now where the Seahawks have Sam Darnold work out for them like Baker Mayfield worked out for the Bucs. And everybody is naturally going to have short-term memory, especially with how the Vikings' final 2 games played out. But Sam is, and I credit Sam, by the way, because Sam is smart. He's accountable. He is very level-headed. He doesn't get too high. He doesn't get too low. And when you think about that as a leader, that's what you want. And Sam even acknowledged in his first Seahawks opening press conference that, hey, I'm glad somebody asked about the final 2 games, but there were reads I wasn't making. I wasn't the same player I was in the first 16 weeks of the year, and I know what I have to do to fix that. So I like where the Seahawks are. They just simply need to upgrade the interior offensive line, but I do like where the Seahawks are. So hopefully James, you like that. All right. Antonio, thoughts on Ravens free agency? I'm going to pull up their exact free agents as I talk about this. DeAndre Hopkins to me he's just a typical Raven in terms of free agency, whether it's DeAndre Hopkins, whether it's Odell, whether it's not Dez, because Dez was really, really done by the time he got there. But just the Ravens have signed some older receivers over the past several years. But I think DeAndre is going to be he's going to be like a 600-yard guy this year, maybe 700 if you're lucky. He will undoubtedly be the wide receiver 2 behind Zay Flowers. Hopefully you get 6-7 touchdowns out of him. But that's about what I think of. That's about what I think of that. All right, H. Brazzy, like the direction of the Seahawks, they will be not good over the next 2 years. Mike Macdonald will get fired and come back home when Harbaugh retires. So I love Mike Macdonald. The way he runs, I can actually talk about this forever, man. The way that he runs simulated pressures, the way that I just really like talking about, they'll call it basically the way that they run simulated pressures in Seattle is they keep everything looking the same, just from a base defense. I'll just use this I'll simplify it as much as I can. They keep everything simple in a base defense, but they'll call this play like broom, which means broom could mean like right end drops out, right? And then outside linebacker goes in. The next play could be like book, where the outside linebacker goes in and whatever. Like they keep it so simple, but everything looks the same. And I love Mike Macdonald's defensive mind as a defensive mind. And I think the future's really bright in Seattle. They just need some time. I hope that they give him some time. So appreciate the super chat. Let's see here. Seamus, what's up, man? We went to sports camp together way back in the day. I do recall. Love the channel. Keep up the incredible work. Ravens, Vikings, Super Bowl, book it. Appreciate it, dude. That's pretty humbling, man. I'm not going to lie. That's pretty humbling. I'll just leave it at that. Hope the fam is doing well. I'm not gonna like discuss personal details, Seamus, but like I'm not gonna say people you are related to. I'll just say that I hope the family is doing well. Although that is incredibly humbling. I'll say that. But I definitely obviously remember and everything, so I definitely hope you're doing well. All right. Thoughts on the Titans? I don't have a lot of good thoughts on the Titans, and this stems back to ownership more than anything. It is not a. Again, I'm a Vikings fan. I'm an NFC fan. My team plays the Titans once every 4 years. I just want to preface this with the fact of I don't hate the Titans. I hate the direction they're going because what are they doing? When you simply ask the question, what are they doing? What is the long-term plan? Let's give Dan Moore $80 million. By the way, I did like the Kevin Zeitler signing. I did like that. I do want to, clarify that I did like the Kevin Zeitler signing. But I don't like where the Titans are headed. I do think at this point, though, that Cam Ward is going to be a Titan. But they bring in Van Jefferson. He's had like 40 receptions over the last 2 years. I wouldn't expect much from Van Jefferson at this point. Their receivers are Calvin Ridley, Treylon Burks, Tyler Boyd, and Van Jefferson. Great, man. That's really gonna, if I'm Derek Stingley on the Texans, I'm going to bed Saturday night before we play. I'm just sweating thinking about that matchup. The Titans they frustrate me more than anything. It's not even a. Whenever I do express concern or frustration with the team, it's more often with how things are being ran with the organization. The Titans are a prime example. All right, let's see here. If there's the one thing the Ravens can't do, it's get good receivers in free agency and or the draft. See, I would normally agree with that, but I mean Zay's the exception, man. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl this past year. He's doing good. He's doing good. I mean, Zay is the exception, if you will. All right. Have you ever been offered a job for an NFL team? Very humbling question, but no, I have not. No, we'll see where this takes us, but I'm enjoying YouTube. I enjoy what I do. But there like the thing is there's other networks that would be interesting if that ever came up, like whether it's NBC, CBS, PFF, any company that came up, that would be interesting for sure. That'd be interesting, but no, I have not been offered. Emails are open though. Emails are open. All right, let's see. Wide receiver knows they need to call it a career and hang up the cleats when they get a 1-2 offer from the Titans or Ravens. I agree with that, unfortunately. And even what's funny is I don't want to continue to dog the Titans because I want the Titans to do well, but some of the moves they make, man, it just goes back years. John Robinson had so many whiffs in the draft. I mean, Isaiah Wilson in the first round is probably the biggest draft bust ever. They drafted him in the first round. He played like 4 total snaps, not 4 years, not 4 games, 4 snaps. And then Caleb Farley was boomer bust. You're going to have boomer bust players are boomer bust. Jeffrey Simmons was a kind of boomer bust player because he tore his ACL in the pre-draft process. He boomed. Caleb Farley did not boom. And then Dylan Radins was not a great selection. Treylon Burke, the arrogance to, this goes back to the process, which frustrates me. The arrogance to trade A.J. Brown, basically say, you know what, A.J., good luck, man, but guess what, buddy? We got your pro comp coming out. He's going to replace your rear end immediately. That's what frustrates me, man. That is what frustrates me more than anything. All right. Which team has had the worst free agency? I just want to pull up like all of the big contracts just to make sure I'm not worst free agency. Appreciate the super chat, Antonio, by the way. This goes back. It goes back to teams that are just not well ran from the top down. I'm just not a fan of what the Saints have done, knowing they're against the cap, and let's just keep continuing to spend money. So the Saints are up there. I'll say the Titans, for as much as I disliked the Dan Moore contract, love the Kevin Zeitler signing. And I think Cody Barton's good. Obviously better than Kenneth Murray. Draymond Jones, like that as well. So I'm not going to include the Titans in that. I'm not. But I don't know how it wouldn't be the Saints to give Jawan Johnson over $10 million a year, give Justin Reed over $10 million a year. Actually, the Browns did something. What was it? The Browns? No, the Browns are not who I'm thinking of. I might have been thinking of somebody else. Somebody else just did something I just did not like, and it wasn't a high value signing. It was. No, I'm not gonna. Well, I didn't like the Panthers bringing in Tershawn Wharton at $15 million a year. That was another one I was not a fan of. But to say they have the worst free agency because of that, I don't agree. I wouldn't say that. I love them bringing in Patrick Jones for 2 years, $20 million. Like the idea of that. Like the idea of Bobby Brown for what it is. I mean, because they had to upgrade the defense. So I wouldn't include the Panthers in that. But it is just more of the process as to which I get frustrated with. All right. Let's see here. Randy Moss when he was on the Titans. Yeah, how's the champs looking? The Eagles are going through it right now just in terms of, configuring the roster, but Howie's got it. He'll be good. All right. Minnesota Vikings making a super team. Appreciate the super chat. And this is what happens when you have money, man. This is what happens when you have money. When you don't have to pay Kirk Cousins $40 million a year, 40 whatever he was making. And this is why this is why they let Sam Darnold walk, to go back to it, by the way. This is if they, Sam got an average of let's just pull this up here, right? Sam got 33.5 AAV, right? The Vikings are paying Will Fry 17.5 AAV. They're paying Javon Hargrave 15 AAV. This AAV is average annual value. I probably should have just said per year to make it less complicated, but regardless. They bring back Darnold. They don't get Will Fries. They don't bring in Javon Hargrave. Or take your choosing of Byron Murphy. I mean, you can take, because Hargrave, Allen, and Murphy are all between 15 and 18 million per year. So take your choosing of any of those three. They wouldn't have been able to bring in everybody they did if they bring back Darnold. So that was why they let Sam walk to begin with. But the Vikings are doing phenomenal. And by the way, the NFC North is just going to, I'm going to make a video on the NFC North after the draft in May. The NFC North is an absolute bloodbath heading into 2025. I know the Bears are, off-season champs and all that. The Bears did a good job this year, like always. The thing is, they actually have competent coaching now and not a head coach on the final, not a head coach on the hot seat that they should have fired the year prior. They have an actual competent coaching staff now, so I believe in the Bears. I'm going to say it. I believe in the Bears for what they are. I don't think they're going to win 14 games this year, but I think they're going to be 8, 9, 10 wins this year. I like where the Bears are, but the NFC North is just brutal, man. All right. Mason Rudolph to the Steelers was bad and desperate. See, I don't think so because of what they paid him. Now, if they gave him a large contract, like a 2-year, $25 million contract, I would say yes. But, at this point, man, Mason's 8 years in. Good for him to get 4.5 guaranteed. I mean, if I was a player and if I was a player like Mason Rudolph and I got $4 million guaranteed at this point in my career, knowing I've never been the guy, I've played periodically. I want to look up Mason Rudolph's career stats for reference. I would love that, dude. I mean, Mason Rudolph at this point, good for him to be able to get $4.5 million guaranteed. I mean, that's like, I know we just toss out numbers like, oh yeah, this guy's getting 12, this guy's getting 21, but $4.5 million for a player who has played in 29 career games, has 28 career passing touchdowns, 20 interceptions. Dude, good for him, man. Like that is the ideal life. $4.5 million, good for him, man. It was $4 million AAV, but he did get 4.5 guaranteed per spot track. So 2 for 8, 4 average annual, 4.5 guaranteed. But like I said, man, you get that money, good for him. All right. Let's see. NFC North is doing what the AFC North did a couple of years ago. NFC North, AFC West are gauntlets. Indeed they are. Indeed they are. 12, that is, wow. 5'3", 120, kind of fast, kind of strong. What position should I play? Center. Be the next Tyler Linderbaum. No, I mean, in all honesty, I'd probably say receiver, but biggest thing is be a high-effort player. Coaches notice that. Be a high-effort player. You are going to have to put some weight on, though, because, I mean, I would imagine high school is not too far, so if you're going to be 14, 15 in high school, you can't be 120, so you're going to have to put some weight on at some point. But be a high-effort player. Always, if there's anything that I could tell any young player, it is always to be a high-effort guy. That is going to be noticed a lot. Do not be a low-effort guy. Do not be a low-effort guy. All right. Jets have Fields, Josh Myers, Garrett Wilson, OSU Jets. They could bring in Josh Simmons in the first round. No, they wouldn't, but that would be fun. All right. Bro, going to have to explain to me how Brandon Stevens got a bag. You know what's funny is I do have a friend that's a really close friend that's a Ravens fan in real life, and he's been a big Marlin guy for several years, and he loves Marlin. But he told me after the Jets signed Brandon Stevens, he was like, I'm glad he's gone. I don't have to look up and see who's getting, or I don't have to watch somebody get burnt and know who got burnt before it even shows like which Ravens players picking themselves up off the turf. So that is a good question to go back to how Brandon Stevens got a bag. And Brandon Stevens, I want to pull up the exact contract. 3 for 36, 23 guaranteed. I'm going to be honest, I don't like that value for the Jets. That's a bad signing, by the way. In terms of bad signings, if you look at it as, I don't know what was said between DJ Reed and the Jets, because everybody, even like week 9 of this year, it was like, oh, DJ Reed's a free agent. DJ Reed's a free agent. Could DJ Reed get traded to a contender? Even in week 9 or 10 of this year, right? But to pay DJ Reed $16 million a year, the Lions 3 for 48, and the Jets to bring in Brandon Stevens for 3 for 36, there's a reason that one team has been in the playoffs in back-to-back years, and one hasn't been in the playoffs in a decade. Technically, a decade and a half, but it just frustrating me. How Brandon Stevens got that good for the agent. And I'm being serious, by the way, because Brandon Stevens to me is just... Whew. All right. There we go. Sorry, had to hydrate. All right. Thoughts on the Giants free agency? The biggest thing with the Giants is, the several million dollar question is, what are they going to do with the quarterback position? Because I think there's a lot of discourse around Shedeur Sanders. I think some people, because of the Colorado, the Dion, the flashiness, there's people that are going to just dislike Shedeur from the start. Oh, he's arrogant. He's this, that kid will never make it in the league, right? I think Shedeur Sanders would be set up to fail if he goes to the Giants at number 3 with no Russ, no Aaron Rodgers, nobody. I think he would be set up to fail, right? That's not a good situation for anybody, let alone a player that would have enormously high expectations like Shedeur would. So for the Giants, I need to see what they're going to do with the quarterback position. That's the big one. But the big signings are, of course, Paulson Adebo and Javon Holland, and unfortunately, Deonte Banks has not worked out as a former first-round pick. Not at all. So you bring in 2 good players. I like the players they brought in for what they are. This team still needs a lot of help. So hopefully they get that in the draft. But Shedeur is, if he goes to New York, I think he would definitely be getting set up to fail, unfortunately. So, all right. Thoughts on the Broncos offseason? I'm all for it, man. Evan Ingram, Talanoa Hufanga, and Dre Greenlaw, plus the draft. I'm all for it, dude. Their defense is already ridiculously good. And then you add in 2 good players. And Evan Ingram, while I don't think Evan Ingram is a game-changing tight end, he's an upgrade from what they had. And anytime you can upgrade and, buy yourself a couple years before you try and find that next guy for the next 3 or 4 years, you still have all your draft capital. Good for the Broncos, man. They're doing really good. They are doing really good in terms of how to build their roster long-term while still also filling holes short-term. I like what the Broncos are doing. Have I ever met or collabed with Brett Coleman? I have collabed with Brett Coleman, had him on for the Texans team preview prior to the 2024 season. I have not met him in person yet. That's definitely something I plan to do, whether it's in Mobile next year for the Senior Bowl, whether it's I'm trying to go to the Combine next year. We'll see how that, there's a lot of moving pieces, I'll just say, with going to the Combine. But if I see him there, I would definitely meet. I before I ever started YouTube, like, he was somebody that I definitely watched back in the 2019 area, back when I was starting my channel out. So have not met him, but anytime I've asked a question, he's answered. It's not like he is a great dude in every sense. So like what you see is what you get, and I mean that in the best way. There's no like, oh, how is he? No, he's a great dude. He's awesome. I actually, by the way, if you were wondering, I DM'd him, pulling up the exact DM a couple weeks ago. I messaged him. So this is a little spoiler for anybody that is watching live that goes back and watches this. I messaged him about coming onto the channel before the draft, and I said, hey, are you available for, 20, 30-minute appearance on the channel discussing the draft? And he said, for sure, sounds good. Let me know when. So he'll be on the channel before the draft. All right, let's see here. Are the Rams Super Bowl bound? There's a lot that could go wrong, not just for the Rams, but for any team, even for the Vikings, who I'm very excited about right now. The Lions are still great. They just need to get healthy. The Eagles are still going to be a great team offensively at minimum. They still have a lot of great players on defense, whether it's Jalen Carter, whether it's either rookie DB from last year. I mean, they're still I'm just thinking of all the players they have, guys. I mean, they still have Lane Johnson, they still have Cam Jurgens, they still have Jordan Mailata, they still have, of course, Saquon. I mean, Arthur Juan, I liked how that flowed, by the way. Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts. No. I don't want to say they're Super Bowl bound just because there's so many things that can go wrong. All right. Let's see here. Appreciate the Super Chat, Speedy. Niners are favorites to win the division. How do you think they'll fare this year? So, good question. The biggest thing for me right now is with the Niners is, yes, they lost some players in free agency, and I'm going to pull up exactly who they lost just so I'm not missing any names. I know Charvarius Ward's the first one that came to mind that they lost in free agency. But the biggest thing with the Niners, right, is they are not going to have the type of year they just had. I mean, they had pretty much everything that could have went wrong last year go wrong. I mean, it was Christian McCaffrey from the start was not good. They had several injuries. They had Trent Williams miss a lot of time. Ayuk tore his ACL. You name it. I mean, they had countless players out. And then, unfortunately, let me actually preface this with something way more because that unfortunately doesn't do it justice. On a very serious note, Charvarius Ward had a personal tragedy in which his child passed away. So there's no quantitative aspect as to, hey, how much does this affect the 49ers locker room? And Ricky Pearsall as well. So everything that could have went wrong for the 49ers last year, it went wrong. So to go back to favorites to win the division, how do I think they'll fare? I feel like it can only go up. I mean, I feel like it can only go up from where they are. The 49ers are still a very talented roster, obviously. Debo is not... You have an offseason to prepare for losing Debo. It's not going to be the end of the world. Debo has played a rough 6 years in the NFL. Debo's best days, as far as I'm concerned, are behind him. He's not going to be the player he was in 2021. Again, to be that 1,400-yard guy plus the rushing aspect, it's not going to happen. Not in 2025 for Debo, unfortunately. Not at 29 years old. But the 49ers, favorites to win the division? I don't know, man. I think I would choose the Rams at this point, to be honest. But we'll see. The good question though good point though from Speedy is their schedule is not good because they finished so low in the division that they're going to play the other low teams across the conference. So that is a good point. All right. So let's keep it going here. I was a big Fields fan early on, but I don't think he's ever going to be a starting caliber player or even close. He's like a Terrell Pryor. There's a good switch up, or there's not switch up, a good, you said switch position, so I said switch. Good callback to TP. TP was electric in his day, man. So anyway, I was a big Fields fan early on as well. I actually really like Justin. I actually didn't think there was that much of a difference between him and Trevor Lawrence as a prospect because I was so high on Fields. And I was also a little lower on Trevor. People treated Trevor Lawrence like he was the next Andrew Luck. I thought he was the best quarterback in the class, obviously, but I didn't think it was Trevor is here, everybody else is just lucky to even be associated with him type thing. I thought it was very much like Trevor, Justin's like right on his heels. But the thing is Fields, I just don't know if we're ever going to get to a point, and I feel like the answer is no at this point. He's 26, or he'll be, well, yeah, I think he'll be 26. I think he'll be 25. But he's a slow processor, and he doesn't read the game well, and that's probably never going to change at this point. And it's frustrating because the highs with Justin Fields are incredibly high. But I don't think we're ever going to get to that point with Justin where he's just processing reads at the rate that other players do. And I hope we get there. But Justin is a very fun player at times, but very frustrating. He's as equally frustrating as he can be fun at times. So, all right. Where do you think Stephon Diggs is going to go? I think he'd go to a contender. I do think he will go to a contender. I feel like Diggs is going to ring chase at this point. Why wouldn't he? He's 30. What is he? 31? 31. Hold on. What is he? He's 31. He'll be 32 in November. So I'd be pretty surprised if Diggs doesn't go to a contender. So he's should be ring chasing at this point. At least, well, not should be. I don't want to tell somebody else what they should do. You get what I'm saying? I would be surprised if he's not. I'll just leave it at that. All right. Thank you, Mahol. Appreciate it. Thank you. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you. All right. Let's see here. Fields, so many turnovers, no pocket presence, sometimes can't see blitzes. I mean, like I said, he's as equally fun of a player as he is frustrating. All right. Thoughts about Rondale Moore potentially signing with the Vikings? He'd be a wide receiver 3. He'd be better than what Brandon Powell was and younger. So I like the idea of that. So hopefully it works out. But guys, we are at 78 likes. Let's go ahead and let's get it up to 100. Let's get it up to 100. Can we do that? We also have a video coming out tomorrow grading the 2021 NFL Draft 4 years later. So we have that video coming out tomorrow. We have a mock draft coming out Tuesday, a little post-free agency mock draft. I will have a guest with the mock draft. And don't forget Speedy. Good call. I do like Speedy a lot. But I wanted to say, there was one thing I wanted to add. So we're at the point in mock draft season where from here on out, my goal is to not do another mock draft solo. I did 2 this year solo. I don't want to just consistently spam you guys with mock drafts, but like if I can do one every 2.5, 3 weeks, I think that's enough space in between things happening, whether it's the combine, whether it's free agency, pro day. Immediately after the Super Bowl, I wanted to get one out then, and we did. But we had one with Bengal, and we'll have another guest on Tuesday, which I'm excited for. So, all right. You're the biggest reason I love football. Thanks. That is genuinely humbling, so I do appreciate that. I really do appreciate that, guys. And by the way, we got to 100 likes, so appreciate everyone being in here. That's what's up. That is what's up. Let's go. All right. What do the Ravens need? The problem, really... I mean, they don't need that much. They're so close. You know what they need? They need a couple breaks to go their way. They need to not turn the ball over in the postseason. I mean, what do they need? Todd Monken to run the ball in January. That's what they need. I mean, we're in an era where the 2024 season, you tell me mid-January, hey, the divisional round, the Bills are going to the Super Bowl. Good for them, man. I'm happy for him. Josh gets his ring. Good for them. Hey, the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. You know what? Doesn't surprise me. They have a really complete team. Hey, the Chiefs are going to the Super Bowl. Of course they are. A three-peat happens. Hey, the Ravens are they're going to win it all. Good for them. I'm happy. The Lions are going to win it all. There were 5 or 6 teams. The Commanders I didn't think were going to win the Super Bowl just because they had that was a unique situation. Not hating. I just didn't think that was a lot for them to go into 3 straight places with a rookie quarterback. I would have been surprised by that. But credit to them. Credit where it's due. The Detroit win was insane. 45 points on the road. But my point is we're in an era where there's so many teams every year where people aren't going to like that I say this, but there's Super Bowl caliber teams that don't get there. I mean, they're teams that are just elite. And we saw that this year with the discrepancy between the dominance between the great teams and the bad teams. And in January is a fun time. I'll just say that. All right. Is Sky Moore the worst wide receiver ever? No. I mean, he's not good, but he's the worst ever? No. All right, let's see here. What do you think the Saints are going to do this year? If we're talking, wins-wise, maybe 7-10, 8-9. I mean, They again, my frustration is with Mickey Loomis and how he chooses to run the organization. It's not that, man, I want no. It's my frustrations with how they run the organization. So not great. Hi from France. That's insane. That's awesome. Keep up the good. Oh, he said who dat after I just dogged the Saints. Sorry about that. But that is crazy. I do appreciate that. Do you think the Saints are going to trade away Demario Davis or Cam Jordan? At this point, I really hope they don't trade away Cam Jordan just because he's a franchise legend. I don't want Cam Jordan to play 1 year for the Raiders or the Colts or whoever. Just 1 year that nobody remembers where he puts up 17 total tackles and 1.5 sacks in 14 games played. I don't want that for Cam Jordan. Just let him finish out his career at this point. All right. Let's see here. Josh McDaniels trying to steal all the Raiders players he can. Is New England's defense scary now? I wouldn't say scary, but I mean, just because scary is a strong word. But I would say very good. I'll say that. Very good. If that's, I mean, I wouldn't use the word scary for a lot of teams. I would probably use it for the 2024 Eagles defense, but not, I mean, I don't think the Patriots are at that level. I mean, personally. I know they brought in Milton Williams, Carlton Davis, technically Harold Landry, Robert Spillane. Even Kayvon Chaison's a boomer bust. I don't think Kayvon Chaison's going to do anything of note, but it's a boomer bust. It's something to get somewhat excited about, or at least to have some hope in. All right, I disagree with your opinion about the Titans. They're going to give Ward a quality O-line, and Ridley and Pollard are pretty decent weapons. The O-line is fair, especially from the Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry aspect, and of course J.C. Latham. That part is fair. I acknowledge that. Ridley is... It's not bad. He's not. I mean, that's a little. I probably shouldn't have said that. He's good. He's not great. Tony Pollard is okay. He's not great. It's not the worst situation ever, but it's not one where I'm like, wow, man, I can't wait to see what Cam Ward does. I'm frustrated. I'm just frustrated with how the Titans choose to run things more than anything. So I would just say that. All right, let's hear. What's the story behind you becoming a Vikings fan? What season did you start watching in the NFL as a whole? You impressed me with your knowledge of video quality. Appreciate it. There's a lot that goes into it. But me being a Vikings fan is my dad growing up being a Vikings fan, and then I just liked who my dad liked, and he grew up in the prime. So like the Purple People Eaters, the Fran Tarkenton, the Bud Grant, the Paul Krause, all that. And then when I was 6, I decided like, hey, I'm just going to root for who my dad roots for. And that was that. And the first game that I actually remember watching, ironically, was the Randy Moss Moon game in January of 2005. Now, I don't remember the Moon itself. I just remember that the Vikings beat the Packers in the playoffs, and that was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, and I actually thought like, oh, like my team's going to win all the time just because I started rooting for them back in 2004, and then they lost to the Eagles the next week, so it was a short-lived thought. But yeah, that's the story. All right. My first round sleeper. Good question. I want to pull up. I like having the consensus draft board up just so I don't forget anybody. So I want to take a look here just again to make sure that I'm not forgetting anybody. So let's pull up the board here. Let me look at like the 35 range. I'll say Savone Ravel, the corner from ECU, is coming off of a torn ACL. His tape was phenomenal. Just hopefully everything works out. I mean, he was going to be a top probably 10 or 15 pick. A team could easily draft him and want the 5th-year option. He could easily be a first-round pick. Let's see who else here. That would probably be. I wonder who's going to be this year's player that's just going to be like, wow, nobody saw that coming. But I'm looking at the board here. Maybe Ariante Ursary. I think he. This has been the year of guys kicking inside, but I think Ursary suits better to kick inside to guard. I know he tested well. I don't think his tape showed the first-round offensive tackle athleticism you'd like. I hope I'm proven wrong. I wasn't the biggest Ursary fan on tape, or at least as a first-round tackle. I like him a lot on day 2, but first round, Darius Alexander would be another one. I like Darius Alexander a lot. He's a defensive lineman from Toledo with violent hands. So those would be up there. All right, there was another question that I wanted to get to. I should put a fish tank behind me. That's interesting. I never thought about that. All right. Let's see here. Only been a sub for about 2 weeks. Glad I found the channel. Humble. Appreciate it. Thanks for the input. Appreciate it, John. I really do. More than you guys know. Jack Besh would be yeah, I like Jack Besh a lot. So Jack Besh would be good too. All right, and then the Bills free agency. Let's talk about the Bills free agency. They Joey Bosa was, to me, as home run or strikeout as it can possibly get. I mean, Joey Bosa, he could have 12 sacks this year. He could play 5 games, have 2 sacks, and that's the end of his Bills tenure. So the NFL actually just announced, this was another thing that happened prior to the stream. Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi are each suspended. It was like 6 games. I want to get the exact wording or exact like definition, or not definition, I don't know why I said definition, but the exact suspension length for this year. All right, let's see here. I just want to get the exact. Bills defensive tackle Larry Ogunjobi and Michael Hoyt suspended 6 games for PEDs. So that's interesting. But Josh Palmer is what it is. You pay $12 million a year. I'm not the biggest fan of that, but $12 million in this day and age is not that much. I'm not a huge fan of it. The Bills, they brought back Damar Hamlin. They brought back Ty Johnson. Like both those. I'm not gonna like hold the Bills accountable for the Michael Hoyt and Larry Ogunjobi signings when they get suspended like 3 days later for PEDs. How are they supposed to know that? But I think the Bills are again a Super Bowl caliber team already. So I would say, I'd give them like a B, maybe a B minus, just because they don't really need to bring in anybody to the point where it's like, wow, we needed Milton Williams to come in for $26 million per year. For reference, I know that they wouldn't bring him in, but you get what I'm saying. So I'd give the Bills like a B or B minus, but that's they're already a Super Bowl caliber team. They just need to like just put the icing on the cake, if you will. Same way with the Ravens. All right, let's see here. What are your thoughts on the Ravens along with Lamar? Pretty much same as the Bills. Copy paste with the Bills. Super Bowl caliber team. They just need to execute when it matters. That is it. We're talking 2 or 3 plays every January for each of the Bills and Ravens over the past couple of years that, hey, if that goes different, they're in the big game. Lamar is 20. They're both 28. Josh will be, I think, 29 by the time the season starts. They're not 40. You would like to think that each player is going to get to the Super Bowl at least once. You would like to think those 2 or 3 plays at some point are going to break either of those teams' ways. So that's pretty much it. Same thing applies. All right. But that is going to wrap up tonight's stream. So hopefully you guys enjoyed. And if you're not subscribed already, please subscribe. Helps the channel tremendously. And new video out tomorrow. So as always, please be safe. Or until next time, rather, as always, please be safe and have a great day. Love you guys.